here are from an HR background? How many are psychs and how many come from a psych background? So how many are from HR? HR, cool. How many from who would consider themselves more from a psych background? Oh, it's a good mix. Good mix. That's going to make my job very difficult because I've got to try and balance the two. And one of the things I want to do today before I start, thank you for that nice introduction, Tash. Interestingly, Victoria, which is the university where I did my PhD, which you call the University of Wellington, they're just going through a big debate to try to change their name to University of Wellington, so not to be confused with Australians, because as New Zealanders we don't want to be confused with Australians. So they're changing from the University or Victoria University. So what I want to know before I start is what sort of things you hope, when you've come here today, what are you hoping is covered? Just so that I make sure. I've of course got some slides, I'm not going to make this up on the spot. But I would like to make sure that I do cover things that you're interested in or pressing. And you can be as controversial as you like. Anything that you're hoping, you've come here today for a reason. So what are some things that you would like to get out of today?
I know personality is supposed to be enduring and doesn't change too much.
Sure.
But I sort of do see that there is quite a bit of potential to personality to change.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to sort of see if your research has aligned with that at
Sure.
all, or if there's any sort of comments that support that.
Yep. Plenty of stuff.
When you said controversial, I thought I'd start.
Yeah, no, that's got plenty of stuff right on that. I think people want it to be more enduring than it is. So I'll certainly talk about that. Excellent. Anything else? What are some other things that you might be interested? You've come here for, you thought, okay, Struth, I hope Paul talks about this.
One thing is that as an HR professional, dealing with difficult behaviors,
Right.
because when you are working in, especially in a technical environment, and there's a perception already about your role as an HR or support services. So I'm trying to understand how to deal with difficult behaviors who are already, means you feel it that someone is coming and how you are going to do that. So we might learn new strategies from you.
Yeah, a little bit. I'm definitely going to touch a lot on difficult behaviours. I'm going to discuss that from an assessment perspective and a selection perspective, less from an intervention perspective, but I will talk a little bit about that. Where I'll be focusing on today is more around how do we select those people out before they come in. And there's no easy answers with anything that I'm going to go over today. I think a lot of the times when people bring me in as a psychologist to organisations, I think they think that I have some fairy dust. I think they think that I can solve the world's problems. And unfortunately, I can't. Difficult people exist. It's like selection. What we're going to think about today and what we're going to learn as we talk through this is it's a game of probability. Anyone who is selling you any selection methodology, whether that be a psychometric test, whether that be an assessment exercise, whether that be an interview, and they say they can predict with 100% accuracy, 90% accuracy, 80% accuracy, 70% accuracy, 60% accuracy, they're all lying. Human beings are incredibly complicated. Incredibly complicated. And we've got to take this on board as HR professionals and as psychologists, because we have to set ourselves realistic expectations. So you will still, unfortunately, after these 45 minutes, you will still have those difficult people. Can't stop those coming through the door.
Just sort of speak about your ideas about assessment match selection in terms of resilience.
Yeah.
And what tools that you're working with at the moment in terms of identifying people who are more resilient.
Sure.
In the workforce.
Excellent. I will be talking a little bit about resilience, so that will be something I'll definitely be touching on. I'll also be talking, and this ties into your point as well, about the enduring nature, and it ties into this difficult people. It's this interplay between personality and the environment, because it isn't one thing. It's the interplay. The interplay and the systems thinking that you've got to take to this is very important, very much when we talk about resilience, because resilience isn't one thing. It's resilient up to what point? It's resilient in what type of environment. It's what is the catalyst for that person's resilience, and what are the proactive strategies that that person can have. All of these things form a system, and if there's one thing you take away from today, I want you to be thinking in terms of this sort of systems approach. Anything else?
A lot of your personality is here and now, what you're like today. Given that we're supposedly going through rapid change and looking for the future and seeing what the 21st century leader is going to be, those sorts of things, how often we struggle with what that looks like. How do we use personality, or can we use personality assessments to predict what it is that we need in the future as well as what we need today?
Sure. So if I understood you correctly, it's how you can predict where that person's going to be in the future, how that person's going to
what we
evolve,
need in the future and whether they're going to match.
and what we're going to need in the future. I think this is a very interesting question. I do a lot of work. My PhD was actually in unemployment and modelling unemployment. And I think when I look at how governments are trying to prepare for the future, it's pretty clear that everyone has a very cloudy picture on what that looks like. So again, if people are telling you that they know what it's going to look like, yeah, they're probably telling you a porky. I mean, the reality is it's very hard to predict. I will talk about some general traits and some general, especially with respect to cognitive ability, that is going to be hugely important in this next wave. Cool, well I think that's a good place to start. All of that I'm going to cover. I'm going to keep coming back to this lecture because what we've termed the pointy thing doesn't work. So the sort of thing that I'm going to talk about, I'm going to be talking about the evolution of personality theories. I think there's a lot of noise in this space, a lot of noise. Different test providers, different theories, different ideas. What I want to give you today is a framework to understand some of this stuff. So I want you to understand the evolution of thinking around personality. I want you to understand a little bit about the neuroscience. And I think that's important in terms of understanding where we're currently at in terms of personality. So what is the current thinking in terms of personality? We'll talk about the aspects of normal personality, and I'll give you a model with respect to normal personality. And that's going down a little bit deeper than the Big Five. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with the Big Five. Going to go down a little bit deeper than that. Then talk about this relationship to work outcomes. And finally, I'm going to talk about maladaptive. So this is the people that you're referring to. What are some of those maladaptive personality behaviours? What is the current thinking around that? And everything that I talk about, I'll be referring to particular papers. At the end of the presentation, everyone can get access to this presentation, eh?
Yeah, just outside we've got a sign-in sheet, so if you put your emails on there, we'll be able to send you out the slides as well. So if you haven't done that already, make sure you do that. Great.
And so the last page has a list of all the references. So for those of you that want the references, and if you can't find those papers, let Natasha know and I can get them for you. So when we think about persona or personality, I think it's really important to understand where this word comes from. It's this idea of a mask. And I think this is really important for us who are involved in this area of selection, because we're having to make a prediction about someone at time 2 from something at time 1. And the accuracy of that time 1 information is always problematic. That's what makes our job so difficult, is what we are getting is this persona, this mask, this public image. And the question that we've got, which is very much in line with what you were asking, is how enduring is this? If I'm making a prediction about how somebody's going to be, not today, I'm not really interested in that data today. I'm interested in what they're going to be like a year from now, 2 years from now. This is a very difficult prediction. I mean, how many of us have made predictions about people, friends, husbands, wives, take your pick, that have not come quite as accurate as we thought a year to 2 years down the line? But we're expected to as HR professionals. And if we think that this person's going to be with us for, say 5 years, and let's make the math easier, we say that this person's a $100,000 job, this is a $500,000 decision. Imagine how nervous you are making a $500,000 decision. But you've got to make them time and time and time again. And that's just the salary. That's before we start to think about the actual return that we want from this person. So there's a lot of disagreement about what this whole personality thing is, does it exist, so on and so forth. I'm going to take you on a little bit of a journey. And I'm going to take you on that journey so that you understand where this idea came from and where we've ended up with respect to personality. Because I think it helps you in working with personality in your jobs and making decisions around personality in the world of work. So the evolution of personality, everyone goes back to the Middle Ages and so on and so forth. The key that I want you to take from this slide is that originally we thought of personality in terms of what we observed. We observed people who had bad tempers, and we gave that a category. We observed people that were more emotionally stable. They seemed to be more resilient, so we give that a category. We create these general categories of people. It's very much on what is observed. Then along comes Freud, and all of a sudden we start to say, hold on, what's going on is at a much deeper level. What's going on, people aren't even aware of. This idea of personality purely being what is observed may not be the whole story. And you know, we've got neuropsychoanalytical people like Carl Jung, whose ideas have been captured in things like the Myers-Briggs. And again, it's this more categorical way of thinking about personality. But what I really want to point to is this idea of this idea that the personality is existing at a level that is beyond just what is observed. So this is the first stages of this evolution. So we've gone from observable behaviour to this idea that what personality is existing at an unconscious level. And then these theorists, especially Cattell, is really where we start to get what we understand as personality. And by that, for most of us in this room, our measurement of personality is from personality tests. It's from assessments, whether that be 16PF, the NEO, the 15FQ, the Hogan, OPQ, whatever it is, right? It's from that model, and so you need to have some understanding of where that model came from. Why do we measure personality in that way? Why is it that that is the model that we've adopted? Not the idea of interviews, not the idea of projective tests, but this idea that we can ask a set of questions, and from that we can derive personality. Hans Eysenck, he was a student of Raymond Cattell's. He reanalyzed a lot of that data, but it's the same concept. I'm less interested in their models at this stage, more into this as a methodology. Why do you think that that became the method? That everyone in this room's adopted it. Why do you think?
Do you mean the mathematical model?
Yeah, that's certainly part of it. Why do you think and when you say the mathematical model, what do you mean?
Well, I guess it's the element of there's numbers. You know, people say numbers can't lie. So
Right.
There's an essence of less bias or interpretation if you give me a number versus you're telling me something.
Yeah. We do have a lot of confidence in numbers. I'd agree. People look at a number and they think that's objective. Yeah, I agree. Why else? Why did we use this as the way that we chose to measure personality?
It's standardized. It's a standardized way of measuring personality, so that it doesn't differ from person to person, so we have more confidence in what you're finding.
Right. So this idea that we're going to get a common measurement across everybody. Yeah. Why do you think we've adopted it as HR professionals? Be honest. There may be underlying reasons. I can think of them. And I'm on both sides of that equation. So why do you think we've adopted it?
I think what you were saying before about objectivity and subjectivity, it provides a level of objectivity that between yourself and a recruiting manager can discuss, sort of its factual.
Who here, thank you for that, who here, using that as the logic, who here would rely on a personality test over an interview? If you had to, we know we'd all use both and Fine. Now, I'm going to force you. Who would use it? Who would use that? Who would use it? One person? Two people?
At certain level, like it depends on the position, the level hierarchy in the organization. Because I will use it at the management level, not at technical level.
You'd use it, and not into. You're not only allowed to use one. This is this game that I'm putting you in, this surreal universe. You're only allowed to use one. My point being that I think this objectivity, I think it rolls off our tongue. I think we talk about it. I don't think that's what I fundamentally don't think that's how people believe. I think they want to believe that. But I think that when a push comes to shove, they like to make that decision. And I'm interested in how HR people use it, as I am with psychs as well, how we actually use it.
I was going to say, it depends on what you're using it for.
Yep.
So, if you want to measure somebody's personality, I would go with a personality questionnaire over an interview any day of the week. But if I wanted to, if what I was trying to do was make a prediction about somebody's behaviour at work, then that's quite different from trying to measure somebody's personality. And I would opt for something other than a personality questionnaire. If that was the one thing I cared most about, and I had to choose one or the other, I would choose an interview for that.
Right. So say that again. If you were to make a prediction.
If I wanted to make a prediction about somebody's behaviour at work, so their performance,
right,
then I would go for a structured interview rather than a personality question.
To predict whether they were going to perform.
Yep.
And by that you're saying not their personality per se. So
yeah.
so the corollary of that question is how much, and this is a really interesting question to the thing that we're talking about, how much does personality play into how much they perform at work? How big a factor is personality? Because you're saying that you would use this to measure personality.
Oh, not the interview. I would use
no,
personality.
That's right. I'm saying that the assessment. So how much does personality play into?
I think that's the challenge. What parts of personality are most important for what individual in each situation?
Yeah. What parts of personality?
And also what you mean by performance.
Yeah.
So if you want to measure, I don't know, building relationships, you look at traits like extroversion, agreeableness maybe. But if you want to measure how hard somebody's going to work, probably use something like conscientiousness or facets from there.
Yeah.
But if you just want that, the trouble is we don't measure performance all that well. We usually just get a rating overall. This person was unsatisfactory, and everyone gets the same rating, except maybe 5 people get a bonus. That's the thing we're trying to predict.
Yeah. We were just going over this today. I mean, it's the hardest thing, right? Is getting a good dependent variable, a good measure of performance. And this is really interesting because these are the complexities of using personality in the real world. This is why I'm choosing this as my methodology to present today, because it's very easy for me just to present information. But there is a reality that exists with the science as well. And there is this complexity that we have that makes it incredibly difficult. And I appreciate the conversation that everybody's raising, with respect to what is subjective, what is objective, how do we use it, what do we do? And these are the real challenges. And when I think of the mathematical model, this is what Cattell really gave us. He used the factor analysis, Spearman's work, and he applied that to personality. So all of a sudden, what he did was he took all the words that we use to describe behaviours, and he clustered them mathematically to come up with this idea of what are the clusters, the primary colours of personality. We all have all these words which we use to describe people. But can we create a common language? And this is an interesting point to reflect on, because what a personality test is designed to do is not for you to interpret it. That's what everybody thinks. They think, I'm interpreting this. If you're interpreting it, there's no objectivity. You flip the whole thing on its head. Because the whole idea is it's a methodology where I can tell you about myself using a common language. That's what it's for. It's not a trick. You know, and this whole thing has been misunderstood, I think. Because so many of the people who are doing it, they're worried, oh, what are they going to find out about me? You know, that thing that I did when I was 6. You know, that's what they're concerned about. And everybody who's there goes, oh, I'm interpreting this like it's a tea leaf. It's not. It's a methodology where I can tell you about myself. That's what Cattell provided for us. So fundamentally, personality testing was never meant to be anything more than a common framework where I can tell you about myself and we can have a common language. That language is what the model of personality ultimately is. And if we look at where that evolves to, later on we get this big 5. Now most of us know the big 5. For those of you that don't know the big 5, easy way to remember this is OCEAN. It's an acronym. And these are 5 characteristics, 5 personality traits that are common to most personality tools. And pretty much all personality tools, getting through all the marketing, getting through all the hype, cluster down into these big 5 characteristics. And so we're taking that same idea of Cattell's, of factor analysing the data, and we're finding what are those big 5 characteristics. I'm going to go through these very shortly, not in great detail because I'm considering that most of you know this. Costa and McRae, by the way, for those of you that don't know, they were students of Bob Hogan's. They made the Neo. Goldberg, he's got sort of the gold standard in terms of Big 5. Digman is often the guy who they point to as the guy who originally found the Big 5, but there's a whole lot of debates on this. The key, however, with the Big 5 is that it provides us with a base to go even deeper. And one of the big things was that if we look at the work of Cattell, and we look at all of that stuff, he's deriving this at a statistical level. It's not a neurological level. He's not going into the brain. He's looking at behaviours, he's looking at words that people can use to describe behaviour, and he's saying, there's this sort of cluster. We cluster those personality tools more, and we get the Big 5. But we need to go deeper again. So many people have stopped at that Big 5 level, and they have not started to think, where is science now? And that's the topic for today. Where is science now, and how do we need to think about personality? So we need to think about this more than just a statistical derivative. If these 5 characteristics, if these 5 traits actually exist, they will have an evolutionary base. We've evolved, and if these traits exist, if they are real, they likewise must have evolved. So there must be an evolutionary base, there must be an evolutionary reason for them. Likewise, they must have a neurological base, so there must be a pharmacological approach to our understanding of them. These dispositions should lead to characters, they should lead to culture, they should be tied to social interventions, whole raft of different things. We have to think broader than just the Big 5. And so we get new definitions of personality that really start to talk about these enduring distinctive patterns. And probably one of the best papers that you can ever read in this space is a paper called the Cybernetic Big 5. I've got the link to this, and this is by the work by a gentleman by the name of de Jong. And most of the good stuff that's coming out at the moment in personality is by Colin de Jong. And he's at Minnesota University in his personality lab. And it's this idea that the way we think about the Big 5 has to be far broader than just these 5 general traits. And he's done a lot of work to look at the neurological links which I'm going to touch on very shortly. But the key with this is that our understanding of personality is now way beyond where Cattell was. But our personality tools are still often focused on the 1940s. Our tools are still stuck at a time when the only thing that we had to worry about was factor analysis, was clustering these items. It hasn't caught up with where the neuroscience is. And we need to start looking at the tie between the neuroscience and the factor-derived tools. You know, we've got lots of different ways now that we can validate these tests. And there's lots of ways that we can validate these models. Way beyond just producing statistics. Things like functional MRIs. You know, getting people to do exercises while they're in an MRI scanner. Now, we know that different parts of the brain, just for those that don't know, this is not a real brain. The brain doesn't unfortunately come colour-coded. It'd be useful if it did. Yeah, but we know that there's different parts of the brain that we can then correlate to functions inside the big five. And we can see this when we look at MRIs. And so we know that there are different parts of the brain that are operating. And some of this is simplistic. You know, we often talk now in terms of networks. But the key takeaway with this is that I want you to understand that we've moved, what we've done in this, or what I've done in this short period, is talk about this evolution. And where are we at? You know, you talked before about the changing world and all of this sort of thing. This is where we're at. And you talked about what's the new world going to look like? Some of the challenges that we're facing. But one of the biggest challenges we're facing is this whole AI challenge. What is AI going to really mean for us? Now, where am I going with that? I'm saying that with the personality work, as HR professionals, as psychologists, we need to have a framework by which we understand personality. We need to understand where all this personality stuff came from, and we need to have a framework by which we understand it. Because otherwise, anybody can come in there and say, hey, look, I've got this test. Mate, this test, it solves all your problems. Predicts everything, teamwork, reliability, attrition, sweet as. And you've got to say, well, what's the basis for this? You've got to understand this at a much deeper level. Because fundamentally what our job is, as HR professionals or as psychologists, is working with people. That's what we do. So if we don't understand the science of that, if we're not up to date with what's current in that area, it's problematic. So this is where the current thinking around personality is. We now think of two major factors that sit above the big five. This is stability and plasticity. And I'll talk about those very shortly. So essentially, how emotionally stable somebody is, how much they like stability in their life. And when we talk about all of these areas, it's about individual differences. Personality ultimately is about individual differences. It's about how we are different from each other. And just as we all have different sized legs and eye colours, we have different traits. We have different dispositions. And those have a neurological base. The other area is plasticity. How open are we to change? How much do we like change? And so we can see that underneath that we have the big five. So if we take something like plasticity, plasticity is extroversion and openness. So if we, an interesting neurological link here, or a interesting biological link here, is who here would put up their hand and say, I'm more of an introvert? Okay. Who here will put up their hand and say they're more of an extrovert? Cool. Okay. One of the things, what I do in my lectures, I can't do it here because we haven't got time, but if you get the introverts to drop lemon on their tongue, and you get the extroverts to produce lemon, put lemon on their tongue, who do you think is going to produce more saliva? It's a messy experiment, right? It keeps the class moving.
Can we do it with wine?
Do you know we can? We can do it with wine. And the effect with the wine is who's going to get drunk quicker.
Oh, Natasha, you're up to it.
Who's going to get drunk quicker?
Excellent.
Why is that the case? Now you know that. So the lemon one you guys were guessing, but that one you guys went straight away. Why are the introverts going to get drunk quicker? Yeah, think about it. Think about what we know about in terms of what our jobs, in terms of dealing with human behaviour. We know that introverts like to be on their own, all this sort of stuff. So think about this with wine. Wine, coffee, and what is it? What would be the neurological basis?
Yeah, it's stimulation.
But it relieves the anxiety.
Yeah, that's something else. That's getting more into neuroticism. But we'll talk a little bit about it. But what is it with, you're onto it, what you were saying?
Norepinephrine or something?
Yeah, keep going. We'll just keep it simple. Keep it simple what you're talking about with stimulation.
Well, the introverts are more easily stimulated.
Correct.
Which is the reason why extroverts are extroverted, because they need more stimulation to get the same neurophysiological response.
Spot on. And this is, thank you very much. We can trade places. But the point is that when we start to understand it at this level, we start to get to a much deeper understanding of personality now. So the reason that the extrovert can handle the noise is because they need more stimulation. The reason the introvert can't is because physiologically they get stimulated far easier. So that same noise, that same level of noise quickly becomes too much. Now this is really important for us to understand from the world of work, because we're now no longer understanding this as a personal preference, but we understand this in terms of individual differences. And that's why understanding this science is important. It's not just fun to know. I mean, I can just see everyone at the next office party. Right, I went to this talk, this is what this guy said. Let's sit in the room, let's get drunk. So understanding how this works is very important. That gives us a better understanding of the big five. But where the big breakthroughs are coming now is what used to be known as the facet level, the level underneath the big five. So what are these common elements? Well, we've always known there's this common element up here. We now know that there's these common elements underneath each of the big five traits. So when we talk about stability, we're talking primarily around serotonin and how serotonin works. You know, some of us just get more anxious. Anxiety has more of an impact on us. So we're going to want more stability. We need more order, we need more structure, because without that, we get a little bit antsy. Likewise, some of us are more, dopamine is a neurotransmitter that is essentially driving you forward. You know, I think a lot of time people think of dopamine as this reward at the end. Well, it's not the reward at the end, that's not what dopamine's there for. It's actually there to keep you going towards the reward. That's its main job. It's not the reward at the end, it's going, hey, that reward's coming. So some of us are more explorative, we're more open. And likewise, extroversion works along the same framework. Now, what does this mean? Stability and plasticity at high levels have great applications to work. And we can start to think of the big five now in terms of their impact at work. Those that are more inclined to want to explore, want to take on new challenges, want to be part of those change environments. Those